Hey guys, and welcome back to the Worth Living For podcast. And on this episode, I just wanted to talk about, and what I'm essentially going to call this episode, It's Not My Job. And just to jump straight into this episode, for example, let's just say you're at work and you're in the staff room and you notice that each person that you see before they sit down and have their lunch, before they have their quiet time in between whatever job they're doing, you just see people constantly just filling up the bin. It's just getting full. And instead of someone taking initiative and saying, hey, this bin probably needs to get emptied, you just see person after person after person throwing rubbish in it, but no one actually acknowledges the fact that, that needs to be emptied. And let's be honest, most people that are just throwing rubbish in it instead of acknowledging, hey, that needs to get emptied, a new bin liner put in, most people are probably thinking, that's not my job. But at the end of the day, you have to think about, yes, it might not be your job, but that is your staff room. Just like everyone else, that's your staff room, which means it is your job, because it's everyone's job to make sure that the next person who sits down and has their break, it feels like a staff room and not just a dumping ground. For everyone's attitude of thinking, well, it's not my job, why should I have to do it? And I think that this comes into contact when we say that we're Christian, but the outward reflection of who we say we are doesn't actually line up with what we've just said. For us to say that we're Christian, but not willing to, chip in and do certain things that, that isn't my job, but actually it is all of our responsibility to do certain things that might not be your job, but it can be an opportunity for us to pitch in and not do things so people notice us, not do things so people congratulate us and thank us, but just to do it even if you don't get thanked and even if it doesn't get noticed. It's the little things we do that make the biggest difference. And for example, in my own job, there's certain things that I'll do that no one's asked me to do, but I'll just do it because it's better for that thing to get done rather than just think, well, that's not my job. For example, say you're at work and you're at work in any job and you notice a hazard, and because you're not employed as the cleaner or you're not employed as the safety officer or whatever, if you notice the hazard but you don't do anything about it because you think, well, it's not my job, that's actually a self-reflection of your attitude and not the fact that you had an opportunity to make a difference and you had an opportunity to do something about that, rather than doing something about that thing when someone gets hurt. Let's just say in any job, you notice a spill on the floor. Instead of grabbing towels or something to clean that up, mop that up and put a wet floor sign caution, wet floor sign, you just leave it because you say to yourself, well, I'm not the cleaner. And I shouldn't have to contact the cleaner. It should be their job to walk around and notice these things. Well, yeah, okay. But then do you do something about that after someone injures themselves, whether it's a staff member or someone that walks into the place of business? We have to come to a point where certain things in our day-to-day lives, it might not be our job to do things, but it is an opportunity for us to actually pitch in and help each other out. And I think, what it really comes down to is the attitude, our attitude towards certain things and our attitude towards certain opportunities. For example, if God is asking you to share your faith with that family member or that friend, but in your mind it's like it's going to be a waste of time and a waste of conversation, because I've tried in the past and I've tried in the present, and both times it's just talking to a brick wall. But you kind of got, we should really look at it as an opportunity of like, what if this is the one time where I share my faith and they're ready to hear? Like their heart has been softened by prayer and petition. They're ready to hear the goodness of what we've come to know. The truth, the freedom, the love that Jesus expresses and shows towards those who are willing to give up their life so they can live for Him. If we continually think, well, it's a waste of time or it's not my job, then we give up opportunities and we forfeit opportunities to make a difference. Like for example, in my job, sometimes I'll get asked to work in an area that, I haven't necessarily been trained in, but I'll get asked to work in an area where, I've worked in that area 4, maybe 5 times now, and I've gotten used to it. And if someone calls in sick, then yeah, I'll put my hand up and I'll just do it. Why? Because it's an opportunity to make a difference, and it's an opportunity to just say yes. And do I love that area? Would I put my hand up to say, yeah, look, if that person's or if someone's gonna call in sick all the time, then just put me down for finishing off my shift to be in there? Definitely not, because it's not my favorite place to be. But is it somewhere where I'm happy to help out? Is it an area where I'm happy to help out and just make a difference? Yeah, because at the end of the day, who else is going to do it if no one else is putting their hand up and saying yes? Like, yes, that's okay. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And I think this stems from the fact that my brother and I are a lot alike, because even at my previous church that I used to go to, but my brother still goes to that church, people used to ask us all the time if we can do certain things, because they knew that we were always happy to say, yeah, definitely. Especially when it came to like handing out like food hampers at Christmas, or just going around to this person's house and mowing the lawn, or, just things like that. Just the everyday little things that those people used to be able to do, but they're either older or, they've had an injury that prevents them from doing the things that they love or used to enjoy doing, but can't. My previous church, and again, like I said, the one that my brother still goes to, people just used to ask us all the time, because they knew that we were the kind of people, we were the kind of blokes that were happy to help out. We were just happy that people actually asked us to do things to help out in certain areas and certain places, And it wasn't, we never felt like we were being used or abused or things like that. We were just honestly happy to help out and, acknowledge the opportunities that were given to us, and just pretty much the only way to put it, we're happy to help. And I think, if we really want to stand there and say it's not my job, then what we're really saying is that we just want to go to work week in and week out, year in, year out, do the bare minimum, do what we're actually employed to do, and then go home. But like, we all know, especially if you're a young adult or you are an adult, I think we can all acknowledge that that's not how it works anymore. You know, jobs aren't what they used to be, and work isn't what it used to be. Sometimes, you know, we have to do certain things that we don't really want to do. And I'm not talking about illegal stuff or stuff that's going to get us in trouble or stuff that's going to ruin your marriage or ruin your relationship with God or the people that you love. I'm talking about just emptying the bin in a staff room or wiping a floor because you notice there's a spill or helping, you know, the customer carry a lot more coffee than one person should have ordered for a workplace that should have sent 2 people instead of 1. You know, I'm talking about just little things that make someone's day and makes a huge difference. And again, you might not get thanked, you might not get a gift card or a certificate or stood up at a staff meeting and everyone claps and cheers and the manager or someone has this good speech pre-planned to congratulate and thank you for your hard work. No one may never notice the difference that you make. But, you know, I think the only reason why some people would want to do the things that they don't have to do, that technically it's not their job. I think the only reason why people don't want to do those things is because they know secretly that, you know, their ego or their hard work is probably not going to get seen or acknowledged or noticed. They're not going to get that it's not going to get celebrated. That the things that they do aren't going to be celebrated. But my point is that we shouldn't do things because we want we want people to celebrate us. We should do things just because it's the right thing to do. It might not be your job, but it is an opportunity for you to make a huge difference. And it's also treating each other the same. You know, like in my job, for example, I'm an AIN. But does that mean just because I'm an assistant in nursing, does that mean that I shouldn't help out the cleaner? Does that mean I shouldn't, you know, take the rubbish and empty the skip for the people that work in the kitchen? Does that mean that, you know, if I've had a big day, that I shouldn't say yes to an opportunity to work in an area that I don't normally work in? No. Instead, it's an opportunity for us to actually respect each other and acknowledge that it's better to be a blessing than a hindrance to the people that we work with. You know, imagine if, I don't know, you are a qualified, like, football coach, like soccer, NRL, gridiron, AFL, whatever. Just any coach. Imagine if you're like a sports coach and, you know, a few weeks out from the big game, the head coach falls ill and they ask you to do the training before the big game and you're like, that's not my job. Like, I'm only assistant coach. I'm not qualified. But what if in your past that you were actually a head coach and you actually trained and led people and led teams to victory, but because the head coach falls ill of the team that you're, you know, co-coach or whatever you want to call it, I don't know the term, but let's just say co-coach, the head coach falls ill and they ask you to be the head coach to train that team before the big game and you say, that's not my job. It might not be your job, but it is an opportunity for you to step up and actually acknowledge that opportunity, Not because if you win the game, you get the head coach position, but if you win the game, you get the acknowledgement from the head coach saying, "Man, I know it's not your job. I know that was a lot of pressure, but thank you." And who knows, that head coach might be an arrogant jerk and they might never thank you if you train that team and win the big game. But in your mind and in your heart, that was the right thing to do because you've got the skill and you had the opportunity and you took it. Not because you were hoping that head coach actually dies, even though they were just temporarily sick. But, oh man, I secretly hope they die But because you saw the opportunity, you knew you had the skill and the training, and so you just said, yes, I'll do it. There's certain things that we should say yes to. There's definitely a lot of things that we should say no to, but there's a ton of opportunities that I feel like sometimes we say no, not because we don't have the skill and not because we don't have the know-how to figure it out, but sometimes we say no admittedly, and the only answer is because we're lazy, because we don't want to do extra stuff that isn't actually our job. But it might not be a job, but it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to make a difference. And not so people acknowledge you, not so people celebrate you, but because we know that when God presents an opportunity, sometimes we just need to say yes. Yes, I'll do it. Because if we don't, who will? If everyone's saying that they're not going to do it, that it's not my job. Love you guys so much.